One minute I'm walking, and the next minute I woke up on this table, like a medical table.
It was as if their house were taking on a life of its own. Run by what? Ghosts?
It revealed a macabre sight of their last few minutes, the final agony frozen in time.
From the boundaries of the universe to the depth of your soul, embark on a journey through the unknown and unexplained as we explore mysteries, magic, and miracles. Hello and welcome. This is Patrick McNee. Today, we'll relive the horror of a real-life poltergeist in a small Texas community. And we'll see how hidden secrets are still being revealed from a civilization 2,000 years old. But right now, we'll hear a first-hand account from someone who claims to have actually been abducted by a UFO. Each year, in this country alone, we spend millions of dollars and countless hours performing scientific research. But are we actually unwilling participants in an even larger research project conducted by extraterrestrials? Although our government continues to deny any knowledge of beings from other worlds, many citizens not only say extraterrestrials exist, but they say they have actually had personal contact with them. In fact, many say they have had the sometimes terrifying experience of being abducted by them. Look through any bookstore, and you'll find a variety of books containing detailed accounts of abductions and apparent human research by aliens. Often, they are written by psychologists, PhDs, and MDs. Often, reports were elicited from patients during hypnosis. Many give detailed descriptions of their abductors. Some have made intricate sketches from their memories. And some abductees even maintain that they were impregnated and gave birth to hybrid offspring on subsequent abductions. But just imagine if you had such an experience. Who would you tell? And would they believe you? Psychologists say most abductees would be reluctant to go public with their bizarre stories. And for this reason, those who have come forward may be only the tip of the iceberg. We were contacted by a young lady from Montana who agreed to tell her story, with the stipulation that we not show her face or her name on television. Now here's her extraordinary account.
The reason I've decided to tell this now is because I want other people who have had similar experiences to know that they're not alone. They're not crazy. I was going to school in Missoula, and it was spring break, so I was headed home to see my folks. The sun was going down when I hit the cutoff to 191. You know, it gets pretty windy and slow in that area. It's very desolate. After a while, I came around this one curve, and I saw this really bright light. It was in the middle of the road. It was so blinding. At first, I thought it was the spotlight from like a police car. But then I realized that it was too high off the ground to be coming from a car. So I put my foot on the brake, but it didn't do anything. I just kept going. The motor ran like my foot was still on the gas. But then the truck slowed down and stopped right in front of that light. I was so scared. I had absolutely no control over my body. As much as I didn't want to go, I opened the car door and I started walking towards the light. I remember thinking, why am I doing it? But I just did it. All of a sudden I went out and everything was dark all around me. But it was like I could make out this ramp. And then all of a sudden this door went up. I couldn't see what the door was in. My eyes were fixed on the opening. I started walking in. It was like my body just took me in. Then I don't know what happened. I guess I must have blacked out because One minute I'm walking, and the next minute I woke up on this table, like a medical table. All these medical instruments were poking at me, and I could hear this whirring sound, like a dentist drill, but not quite that loud. I couldn't feel any pain when they touched me. I couldn't feel anything at all, really. I just felt like my body was made of lead. I couldn't move. Even my fingers, I wanted to see who was doing this to me, but my eyes, they wouldn't move. I was totally paralyzed. I don't even know how long I was lying there. It seemed like time was different. And then, I guess I must have blacked out again. The next thing I remember, I was back in my truck. The motor was still running and the bright light was gone. My head hurt, it ached, but I got back on the road feeling very confused. I looked at my watch, it was 1 a.m. I'd expected to be home by 10. I finally made it home. I went in and looked in the mirror. I couldn't see any marks on my body, but I knew I didn't dream this. Then I looked at my head. Right inside the hairline, there was this little mark. It's never gone away, and it's been a year now. For a long time, I didn't tell anyone about this. Graduated now, and I have a good job. People would think I'm crazy, but I know this really happened.
If it were only one person, it would be harder to believe. But when you compare all the various accounts and see the similarities from one to another, it can really make a believer out of you as you drive late at night on some deserted highway. Alien encounters and abductions can change the way a person sees the world and humanity's place in it. Our story on extraterrestrial art brought attention to two men's lives that have been positively affected by their encounters. Both Carlos Macias and Steve Neal have turned their experiences into careers as artists, hoping to share with all people their personal visions. Since our interview with Carlos, he claims to have returned to Zaka and the energy beings, and is anxiously awaiting his next visit. A lovely tree in the front yard of your new dream home. Perfect? Well, not if it happens to lie on top of an undiscovered graveyard. Experiences by one family in Texas turned their dream home into a nightmare and became an obsession for the entire neighborhood.
This may seem like an ordinary neighborhood, but 7 out of 8 families picked up and moved far from here at tremendous cost, including losing their mortgages. I wonder what really happened to drive them all away.
The box office hit Poltergeist tells the story of a terror-stricken family whose home was built on top of an undisclosed graveyard. Good horror fiction? Not necessarily. During the same time the movie was released, these silver screen nightmares became reality for residents in a Texas subdivision. Their story began in 1981 when Ben and Jean Williams moved into their dream home, a newly constructed house in this brand new subdivision. Shortly after settling in, however, a strange feeling crept over them. At first, the feeling manifested itself slowly as mere oddities. Hundreds of ants invading the house, snakes slithering through the floorboards, plants not growing, and unusual sink spots in the yard that couldn't be filled in. Then other things began. Toilets flushing on their own, the garage door opening and closing by itself, unexplained noises and images, none of which had a logical explanation. At first, neither Jean nor Bill talked about what was happening or what could be causing it, although each had their own private thoughts. Thoughts that frightened and bewildered them, once too bizarre to even contemplate. It was as if their house were taking on a life of its own. Run by what? Ghosts? But why? How? Houses built in the Newport subdivision were built on what was once McKinney family land. The McKinneys are no longer living, but at one time they were wealthy landowners with a huge plantation and countless slaves.
I just knew there was some slaves buried down. That's what I heard.
Okay.
We spoke with Freddie Eagleton, the oldest living resident of Barrett Station.
Yeah, I've been here all my life.
He confirmed there were no grave markers in that area.
The place was owned by Will McKinney, and he let, our folks bury up in here for a long time,
The site of these unmarked graves became known as Black Hope Cemetery. John Armstrong, the grandson of Harrison Barrett, founder of Barrett Station, showed us the place.
So do you have firsthand knowledge of the fact that in that Newport area there were actually people buried there?
That's true. That's true.
Descendants of the slaves of the McKinneys live here in Barrett Station, not far from Crosby. They remember Black Hope Cemetery. Some of their relatives are buried there.
I know one of my seniors that come here, he has a family that was buried out there at the Black Hope Cemetery.
Oh yeah, lots of people buried there. I have buried some of them in there myself.
We spoke with Keith Krizak, whose father Daniel owned White Cemetery during this time, one of the few established cemeteries in the area. I asked if he thought it was possible to have these homes built on top of a graveyard.
Folks were buried back there, and it's the cemetery, just no one knew that there was a cemetery back there at all when they developed the area.
In fact, some did know.
Jasper Norton lived at the house behind me. He has since died, but he was one of the few people who warned the residents in the Newport area that they were building on graves. In fact, he himself buried people in those graves when he was 14 years old. He pointed out some of the unmarked grave sites, but apparently nobody listened to him.
As time went on, whatever spirits might have been awakened at the Williams house influenced everyone who came into contact with them. The family experienced an uncanny number of misfortunes, deaths, and diseases. Even the animals were affected, behaving strangely and dying unexpectedly. The Williams withstood their plight in silence. Then their worst fears were realized when their neighbors, building a pool, unearthed the corpses of two people, a black man and woman.
They would never find out that if they wouldn't dug a pool. I know where the graveyard was in that area before they went to building all in there. When they went in there and selling that land, and they just went selling, and they wasn't thinking about the grave was in there.
After that, the terror escalated. Footsteps became almost commonplace. Ben was the first to notice the shadowy figures that loomed in the dark. Sometimes they would literally attack him in the garage, suffocating him. Jean finally had enough. She took a shovel and began digging next to an old tree, a tree, she was warned, that marked a gravesite. However, she didn't make it but a few inches down. Her daughter died suddenly that day. With nowhere to turn and no way to console themselves, the family left that house forever. Although there are people like realtors and neighbors who may not believe what happened to the Williams family, it was hard not to notice all the for sale signs.
The truth is, you never really know what you're building on top of. And in the process, if you disturb sleeping spirits, for this family, their lives can never be the same. For anyone else, well, hopefully, it's just a movie. This experience really hit the Williams hard, so much so they wrote a book to document their nightmare. And they firmly believe they weren't the only ones, that there are similar cases of poltergeist phenomenon. They encourage anyone with such experiences
to write them in Montana.
Buried for millenniums, the discovery and excavation of a Roman city has given the modern world an eerie glimpse into a disastrous past.
For nearly 1,700 years, an ancient city laid preserved under 65 feet of hardened lava, like a fossil waiting to be discovered. It was by chance that the first ruins of this city were found. After years of excavation, the entire city of Pompeii slowly but surely began to reveal its secrets. The ancient Romans considered volcanoes to be the chimneys for boiling hot fires underneath the earth, guarded by the god of fire. So strong was their belief in the god of fire that the people of Pompeii paid no attention to the dormant volcano on whose slopes they had built their homes. In the early morning of August 24th, nearly 1,900 years ago, a violent quake rocked Pompeii. Vesuvius, the dormant volcano, had blown its top. The people were overwhelmed by the red boiling lava, but that was not their only enemy they had to fight. Volcanic fumes and flying rocks, all of which caused thousands of people to die miserable deaths. It took only a few hours for the entire city to be buried under a stream of mud-mixed lava. After the black cloud of ash had settled, a ghostly silence befell the area. Pompeii and the surrounding villages were literally wiped off the face of the earth. One 18-year-old survivor later wrote about the disaster. "We were enveloped in darkness. Only the shrill cries of women, the wailing of children, the shouting of men were to be heard." Grass and trees gradually grew over the land where the town once stood. Millenniums later, the ancient world still speaks to us through Pompeii. Excavations in the 1800s showed everything to be well preserved. Even the victims' bodies could be reproduced by pouring plaster into the vacuums left by the hardened lava. It revealed a macabre sight of their last few minutes, the final agony frozen in time. One man clearly fought to the bitter end, still propping himself up on his elbow to rise and help his family. Women and children laid hand in hand. Some took shelter in the corners of their homes. Others tried to escape. Very few succeeded. Midday meals were left behind. Loaves of bread could be found still in the ovens. Even after that fatal day, Pompeii's history was clearly preserved. Pompeii was a well-laid-out city with narrow, straight roads. It was an active commercial city with a rustic character that was much appreciated by lovers of good food and fine wines, poor and rich alike. The wealthy citizens painted the stories of their lives on the walls of their homes, giving us a glimpse of the people's spiritual outlook and lifestyles at the time. Gardens were invaluable. Political issues were just as important as they are today, and religion was nothing short of essential. Pompeians were always in the presence of the gods. They worshipped them in the many temples around the city. Stories that we know today as myths of the gods and goddesses were taken seriously then. In one of the large villas at the bottom of a wine vat, a hoard of silver treasure was discovered. A servant at the time had no doubt hurriedly tried to protect it at the time of the eruption. It is altogether a beautiful and enlightening glimpse into ancient history. With modern technology, we are often fooled into believing we have discovered all the remains of our past. But who's to say how many more mysteries lie buried beneath our planet's surface?
A grim find surprised the workers in a tinder plantation near Lindo Moss, England. The severed body parts of a man were scattered in loose peat. Killed by a small axe, he was thrown in a swamp by his murderers. Although the body was found, little could be done to punish the killers. You see, the high acid in the peat preserved the body, solving the mystery of this horrible crime. That had taken place nearly 2,000 years ago. Even after 2,000 years, there seems to be something to the saying, time will tell. This is Patrick McNee. Join me next time for more mysteries, magic, and miracles.